Hi there, welcome, and thank you for being interested in my design surfing. Surfing is an elongated oval scarf that starts with a circular cast on and is knit in a round. To obtain this oval shape, we make increases along a symmetrical line in both directions, and in this case, we're using a beaded increase. This means we add a bead and then we make an increase. And we do that again on either side in a straight line. In this video, I'm going to show how to work the cast on and work the first couple of rounds, which includes also adding the beads and making the increase. And I will show how to manage your cable as you're working those increases. Then I'm going to show you a trick of how to minimize the jog when you are working garter ridges in a round. So I'll show that. And then the last thing I would like to show is how to work this really cool pinwheel shaped stitch. To start, for this design, you need to use a circular needle, either using magic loop method or two circular needles, or knitting in a round via two circular needles. And the cable for that needle needs to be very long. Now in this demo, I'm using a short cable because it makes the demonstration a lot easier. We start surfing by doing a circular cast on, and in this case, because we have a large opening for surfing, I'm going to loop the yarn around my fingers twice for this cast on. A traditional circular cast on, you would just loop the yarn around your fingers once, and you would bring the tail yarns through that loop. For this cast on, I'm going to loop the tail yarn twice around my fingers and then bring the yarns through that loop, and then I'm going to begin my casting on. I start with making a yarn over and a knit one, and I repeat the yarn over knit one until I have 30 stitches on my needle. I've casted on 30 stitches, and now I will pull all these stitches onto the cable part of the needle, and will draw the tail yarn to start tightening that opening in here. And you'll notice as I draw this yarn, only one of the loops is getting shorter. So I'm just going to pull it enough, and then I'm going to grab on this tighter loop on the right hand side and pull to tighten the other side. Here I'm going to tighten it to the size that I need for my final pattern, or as suggested opening size, which is about 1 inch. And then I'm going to take the tail yarn and gently draw to match that. So here we are. In this design, we're going to keep about 1 inch of an opening in the center of the center of the pattern. At this point, I'm going to split my stitches about a half, and I'm going to begin knitting via magic loop. And I'm going to put a stitch marker to mark my beginning of the round, and knit one round. I'm approaching the end of my round, and I'm going to transfer my stitch marker onto my right needle tip, and at this point I'm ready to begin working my round 2, and I want to make sure I'm using my ball yarn, not my tail yarn. Here, this is my beginning of the round. My pattern says to knit 7 stitches, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then it asks for making a beaded increase of 17 stitches. That means I'm going to first insert a bead on this stitch, then replace it back on the left needle tip. But before I make my increase, I'm going to draw all of these stitches that are on the right needle tip onto the cable part of the needle. Give myself enough slack in the cable, and then I'm going to make my increase. And the increase is worked by knitting 1 stitch, then making a yarn over and knitting 1 stitch, and repeating yarn over, knit 1 until we have 15 stitches. I've made my 15 stitches. Then I will continue knitting to follow my pattern, which says to knit 7 stitches. And then I repeat for that row, which is to knit another 7 stitches. And I need to make another increase. But before I do that, I'm actually going to draw the right needle and place all of these stitches, including the increase, on the cable part of the needle. But what's important is I'm going to maintain my loop in here. So then I will mount the next set of stitches to be worked so that I can continue working my pattern. So the next step is to make another beaded increase. And I inserted my bead, put it on the left needle tip again, and I will repeat this process of making 15 stitches. I knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, then repeat yarn over, knit 1 until I have 15 stitches. So I finished and I made my next increase, and then I will continue knitting to the end of the round. What's important as I get to the end of the round is that I am going to keep my loops on both sides. 1 loop right before the first increase and 1 loop right before the second increase. And this structure will, in terms of how I make my loops in my cable, will have to remain for the entire shawl or scarf. Next, I want to show you a little trick to minimize the jog of the garter ridges when you get between the end and the beginning of the next round. If you've ever knit garter in the round, you will notice that there's like a line, or you'll see a bit of a shift between the beginning of the round and the end of the round that causes a bit of a visual jog. So this trick is going to minimize that jog. So let me reposition my loops where they should be. And get my stitches back where they need to be. So I just purl to the end of the round. And then what I need to do is transfer that stitch marker, lift that first stitch, bring my yarn around it and to the back, put it back on the left needle, and then now I am ready to continue with my pattern. And you'll notice, so let's just say I'm knitting with this same color, and then I just go ahead and knit, and let me show you a little, put them on. You'll notice here that this loop that I wrapped my yarn around is kind of bridging a bit of a gap, and this bridging of the gap will minimize the visual jog. In this last segment of this video, I'm going to talk about the pinwheel or the pinwheel rounds, and I'm going to show you how to make these pinwheels. First, if you notice that as we trace around this round, this pinwheel round, those pinwheels stop right at the tip. So we make pinwheels all the way along the round, but we don't make any pinwheels at the tip. We knit through that last increase, and we add the bead, and then we continue down the other side of that increase, and then we begin making the pinwheels as we continue with the round. Back to my sample. I'm going to finish the round before the first pinwheel round, and as I did before, I'm going to transfer the stitch marker, wrap that first stitch after the marker, and then I'm ready to begin working the first round of the pinwheel. That round is worked with my first color, and so you'll notice this is coming from that row below and from that wrapped stitch. I don't want to pull on it too tightly, but I do want to pull on it enough so there isn't too much slack in the back. So just a little bit, because if you pull on it too tightly, you'll notice it's going to, right here, it's going to pull on the fabric. We don't want that, so we want it to stay comfortably, or good tension on that stitch. And to begin the first setup row of the pinwheel, all of the stitches that need to be set up, we're going to knit them, and as we knit those stitches, we're going to wrap the yarn around the needle twice. So every stitch, we insert the needle as if to knit, wrap the yarn around the needle twice, and we work that all the way around. We work that all the way until we get to that last increase right here. So these are the 17 stitches, these are the 15 stitches from that last increase. So we are going to knit all of these stitches with 2 wraps until we get here. When we get here, we're going to knit normally to the 8th stitch, which is the center of that increase. Then we're going to insert a bead and then just knit normally until we get to this point, and then all of these stitches all the way to the next increase will be worked with 2 wraps. I have finished off working my setup round for the pinwheel. Next I'm going to actually work the pinwheel in the second round of the pinwheel, and this is what I am calling 7 in 7 in the instructions or in the pattern. I'm going to lift the next 7 stitches. Actually, first I'm going to move my yarn to the front because I'm going to be purling. Going to lift the next 7 stitches, releasing the extra wrap, and 7, and I'm actually going to transfer them back to the left needle tip, but I'm going to keep my right needle tip also inside, and I'm going to work 7 stitches to replace these 7. So I'm going to work the 7 stitches as if I am purling 7 together, but I'm going to actually create 7 stitches at the same time. So I'm going to purl 1 stitch, make a yarn over and bring the yarn back to the front, purl, yarn over, continue this yarn over purl until I have 7 stitches. Now I've got 2, 4, and 5, yarn over and purl. And this is the 7 in 7. Let me show you how to work this continental style. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So my next 2, 4, 6, 7. So insert my left needle through the back loops of those, but keep my right needle tip also within those, and then get some tension on my yarn, purl, yarn over, purl, yarn over, and purl, and that's 5. 1 more yarn over and a purl. You'll notice I'm keeping these stitches relatively loose because I want them to be about equal. So I'm releasing those, and you'll notice in here they're about equal. So I want to also bring to your attention this float in here. So when I create a succession of these pinwheels, I am causing a float to go in between them. So this float we are going to take care of on the next round. So I'm going to make 1 more pinwheel, and I'm going to scoot over and start the round. So I'm not going to finish all around because I'm going to get to this point and I want to show you what to do with this float. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to scoot these stitches back to the side because I want to show you next how to deal with that float between the pinwheels. By the way, pinwheel is not necessarily the official name for this stitch. It's just that I think it looks like a pinwheel, so I named it pinwheel. But potentially you know it under a different name, so excuse the reference if you are familiar with it under a different name. Alright, so next I'll be working with my contrast color, or the second color, and I'm knitting to that last stitch in the pinwheel, which is stitch number 7, and then I'm going to grab this float, just go under it and go through that stitch. So again, go under that float and through that stitch and knit that as if you're knitting together. So see that, and that float is now contained, it's not floating anymore. Let me do it one more time. I split my yarn in on this stitch, so I'll fix that. Oops. To that last stitch in the pinwheel, I'm going to insert my needle tip under that, through the stitch, and I'm going to knit them together like that. So this concludes the demo on this video. There is one more video coming up to show you how to work the inner border. Thank you for watching and happy knitting.